All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. After a productive day at the bargaining table, I'm pleased to report that the Chicago Teachers Union House of Delegates voted to end their work stoppage. That means teachers will be back in classes tomorrow, and all students should return on Wednesday. I want to say that CPS put a great proposal on the table that both bargaining teams discussed in detail throughout the day. Now we'll be able to get teachers back into the classroom tomorrow and our kids back on Wednesday. Our team has worked very, very hard every day, over the weekend, long hours at the beginning of the day and into the night, working to get through all the issues that were on the table and get to this moment. We know that this has been very difficult for students and families. Our goal throughout this entire process was to both get our students back to in-person learning as quickly as possible and prevent work disruptions for the rest of the school year. Now, I want to make sure that parents understand we heard you. We're not standing here making this announcement without the parent activism, the parent voices, the parent demands that we heard. And I want you to know that for myself, and I believe that I speak for CEO Martinez, we will never, never not have you at the table with us. It's been extremely helpful to hear from you. The calls, the emails, the text messages, the petition, all the other things that parents have done over this difficult few days to make sure that their voices were heard. I encourage you, keep going. We need you at the table always. Some will ask who won and who lost. No one wins when our students are out of the place where they can learn the best and where they're safest. After being out of school for 4 days in a row, I'm sure many students will be excited to get back into the classroom with their teachers and peers, and their parents and guardians can now breathe a much-deserved sigh of relief. I know that there are hardships that people endured through this process, and we've got to make sure that we are understanding that and doing everything that we can support you to get over these difficult days. This most recent fight, if you want to call it that we have been in is a fight for access to in-person learning. Learning that is far superior to the remote programming our students had to endure for far too long last year. Let me remind you, when we were all remote before, we lost contact with 100,000 children. That's nearly a third of our CPS school population, a third. When we were all remote before, parents and guardians lost their jobs because they were having to monitor their children at home. No parent should be forced to make the choice between earning an income to take care of their family or being home to monitor their kids on remote learning. That's a choice we should never force parents into, absent an emergency that did not manifest itself this time. Think about who our kids are. Over 70% of our kids qualify for free and reduced lunch. That means they come from poor and working class families. Families with adults who sometimes are working multiple jobs to keep the family afloat. Switching completely back to remote learning again without a public health reason to do so would have created and amplified the social, emotional, and economic turmoil that far too many of our families are facing. We can never forget the impact on the lives of our children and their families. They must always be front and center. Every decision has to be made with them at the forefront. There are many people to thank for getting us to this moment. And I want to thank, first and foremost, CPS CEO Pedro Martinez. He and his team have done yeoman's work and been steadfast partners in making sure that we focus on getting our children back to in-person learning. Thanks is also due to CDPH Commissioner Allison Arwady and her team, who would provide the science and the data to make sure that we were making informed decisions that recognize, of course, the surge in Omicron, but didn't abandon the science in the midst of a pandemic and a lot of misinformation that was being spread. So thank you, Dr. Arwady. I'd also like to thank those in our school community, not only for their patience, but for making their voices heard throughout this process. I can't thank the parents enough. Thank you. Thank you for being steadfast. Thank you for being resolute. Thank you for being relentless. And last but absolutely not least, I want to thank the families throughout the CPS ecosystem who have really stood up. I want to thank all the people in the community who help support these families. And I want to thank the teachers. I said this before and I believe it to be true. Teachers are so important to who our young people become. They have such an influence over their development. I know that to be true from my own experience. Teachers in our system love their students. That's why they became teachers in the first place. That's why they stay teachers. That's not what this was about. We love our teachers. We continue to support our teachers and do everything we can because they go above and beyond to support the students and their families, and we can never lose sight of that reality. They're very, very important to the health and well-being of our children. I want to just close by saying this. As long as I am mayor, I will never, ever not be on the side of families and their children. And let me say that in the affirmative. I will always be on the side of our children and their families. I was you when I was a kid growing up in my public school. I needed my school. My school made a difference in my life. I'm not standing here today without the support that I received from so many teachers along the way, so many people who reached out their hand to me. We didn't have much, but I knew, because my parents knew, that education was a great equalizer, and I'm living proof of that. And I want to make sure that we're providing the same kind of opportunities for learning and nurturing and growth for every single student in our system, regardless of their circumstances, regardless of zip code. We owe them that. And I want you to know that I am committed to making sure that we run through walls to make sure that you have access to great quality education in a safe and nurturing environment. With that, I'll now turn it over to CEO Martinez, who can tell you a little bit about things from his perspective. CEO Martinez.
Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot, for your leadership and your courage. And thank you, Dr. Arwady, for always being there as our thought partner with the science, with the data. First of all, I want to just thank all of our staff, our principals, teachers. We had 16% of our teachers that came into work today. We had 159 schools that put up in-person enrichment programs, including 3 schools that had in-person services for full instruction. And this wasn't easy for them. It was a lot of challenges. And I also am just looking forward to welcoming all of our staff to come in tomorrow. I wanna just work forward, and I wanna make sure that everybody knows that we are committed to the safety of our students. We're committed to the safety of our staff. We're gonna work together. There's some really good things in this agreement. There's some really good things that are gonna continue to strengthen and build on the procedures and on the safety protocols that we put in place. Expanded testing, having a stronger effort around supporting our schools, whether it's contact tracing, the additional investments in PP&E, the fact that even people from the silence came finally to support us with additional resources for testing. So going forward, again, I want to thank all of our staff who have stuck with us. As the mayor said, we cannot do this without our families. If there is a lesson, and I heard this loud and clear, families have to be at the table. Families have to have a voice, especially as we move forward. I commit to you right now that that is what's going to happen. Every key decision we make, parents will be at the table. My principals will be at the table, as well as our other staff. So again, I'm excited. Families, again, tomorrow, classes are still canceled. Staff will be working from our buildings. Wednesday, all children will be embraced and welcome to come in person Tomorrow, there's still enrichment programs at individual schools. Again, parents, please, as always, make sure that you're constantly listening for your school's call. But again, overall, classes are canceled tomorrow, and we are excited to welcome our children on Wednesday. Thank you.
Happy to take your questions.
Thanks a lot, Mayor. We'll start off with Dana Kozlov, CBS. Go ahead, Dana.
Thank you. Mayor, or CEO Martinez, what was the final issue and its details that prompted the CTU to take the proposal back to its delegates?
Well, I really do think you ought to ask them. I don't want to purport to speak for the CTU. I don't think that would be appropriate. But what I can tell you is, in broad strokes, this. We reached an agreement on the metrics for, at a school-based level, for when we needed to convert a classroom or a school to go remote. Not surprisingly, the component parts of that depend upon staff and or student absences. As CEO Martinez says, we test in every school every week now, but we've added some layers to enhance the testing that will be done, and again, appreciative of the additional testing resources that we will be able to access. We are committed to engaging families to increase testing consents. That's a critical part of it. We want to get to as high a number in testing consents as we possibly can, and we're going to work jointly with the CTU to get that done. There's a new proposal that's going to be put into place regarding contact tracing that will give opportunity for individuals at schools to be a part of contact tracing after the appropriate training, and new incentives to increase the number of substitutes in the districts. Those are some of the key points. As soon as we know that the membership has voted to approve this agreement, we'll release the written document with all the additional details to you.
And that leads to my second question. Are there any guarantees that CTU teachers rank and file will remain in person post-Tuesday should they vote this proposal down?
Well, I'm going to emphasize the positive. I think it's meaningful that the House of Delegates voted to end the work stoppage, and certainly my hope is that the rank and file teachers who will be voting, and we're told sometime later this week, will ratify the agreement.
All right, Carmen Vargas, Univision.
My question is for CEO Martinez. Señor Martínez, si me puede explicar cuál fue el proceso y el acuerdo al que llegaron con CTU y en qué consiste.
Sí, bueno, lo más importante que los padres quiero que sepan es que todos los empleados van a regresar mañana a nuestras escuelas y el miércoles es cuando van a regresar todos nuestros niños en persona. Y lo que estamos de acuerdo, tenemos vamos a tener más capacidad para exámenes de COVID. Vamos a invertir más, por ejemplo, en mascarillas para los niños y para los adultos. Y también la prioridad es igual, la seguridad de nuestros niños y nuestras familias y nuestros empleados. Again, for us, we just said that the main thing for parents to know that children will be welcome to come on Wednesday, and we are making more investments in COVID testing and PPE, and our priority continues to be the safety of our staff and our children.
We'll go to the back with Rob Elgas, ABC7. Go ahead, Rob.
Mayor, this question is for you. Chicagoans were frustrated as this went on. Parents were, obviously, teachers were concerned. And you talked a little bit about your message to parents, but can you speak a little broader on your message to this city? I know you will face re-election. I don't want to talk about that necessarily, but this was a mess. People were banging their heads on the wall saying, again, these two sides can't figure it out. You did, but it took some time and it took some resources, and people are frustrated. I was just hoping you could address the frustration everyone's feeling about this as you come to a solution.
No one's more frustrated than I am. No one's more frustrated than I am. We should have stayed at the table and worked this out. That's why I said early on, enough is enough, and drew the line. This was not necessary to happen. And I'm glad that we're hopefully putting this behind us and looking forward. But, there does come a point where enough is enough. 3 work stoppages in 3 years, of course people are frustrated. Why wouldn't they be? But I'm hopeful that this is the end, at least for this school year. So the agreement that we have proposed takes us through the end of summer school, and I'm hopeful that we will have a stable, uneventful rest of the school year. But I absolutely understand the frustration. I'm frustrated. We need to be working together to solve real problems in the school system. We could have worked together to solve this without a work stoppage. I don't control that, because if I had, there wouldn't have been a work stoppage. But it is what it is. We didn't throw up our hands. We worked our tails off. My team, CEO Martinez's team, outside counsel, inside counsel, we worked really, really hard all day long into the evening hours to get to this point. I wish it had been resolved sooner. I wish it had never happened, for sure. But I absolutely understand the frustration. But my job, once something like this happens, is to get to a resolution as quickly as we can and do it in a way that has fidelity to what we were hearing from our parents and our students, and fidelity to the public health science, but also fidelity to our own experience with remote learning and what we know and the harm that it caused way too many kids. We were just starting to really see some recovery from those 100,000 kids that were disengaged. This set us back, but no obstacle is insurmountable. I'm convinced of that. But we've got to stay focused on what's most important, and that's our kids being in person in the safest place for them, even in the middle of a pandemic, because of all the supports that we put in for COVID mitigations, the masking, the social distancing, the partitions, the hand sanitizers, the real emphasis on making sure that we're doing the right things in those classrooms every single day. That's why schools are safer. That's why. And we can't lose sight of that. The data tells us that. The studies tell us that of our own system, of the Archdiocese system, those schools are in the same neighborhoods as our schools are. That is not in dispute. And hopefully we put that issue behind us once and for all. I want to see us get back to what our primary function is, which is to teach our kids and model the kind of example that we want them to follow.
The 16% that Pedro talked about, the teachers who went to school,
Mm-hmm.
does that number surprise you? Did you think it would be more or fewer? I just thought I'd ask your reaction to that.
Look, what I'll say about this is, you can do the research on the history of who follows the union and who doesn't, and what the percentages are. So I think a statement was made by those teachers. I'll leave it at that. And I thank them for making that statement. I thank them for stepping up and doing the right thing for the families that need them most. These are really tough times. We've been through a hell of a lot in almost 2 years of COVID, an economic meltdown, civil unrest, increased violence. This has been a really hard, stressful, and traumatic time on all of us, and it falls heavily on our children and vulnerable families. The thing we need to do is unite to support them because they need us. That's what we need to be focused on.
That's a wrap, Mayor. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.